episode 2
Episode 2
of Stories with an Old Soul. That seems to be the title.
Old
Old
the word.
soul. No, old soul. Let's get that
Don't
straight.
say the word old. Yeah, I've always been an old soul though. Anyway, I was going to tell you about how they came by living there at the farm.
Your parents or your grandparents?
My grandparents.
Okay.
My grandparents. My grandparents. My grandfather. His father and mother and the family owned another farm down in Northampton, New Brunswick. After his father passed away, the mother decided that she was going to sell out, and she sold out the farm. And my grandfather and grandmother had to find another place to live.
Mm-hmm.
And they had lived there with them their whole lives. With the understanding that the farm would go to them. And of course it didn't. So anyway, they were working for other farmers for several years. I'd say about 15 years, working around with other farmers, just keeping their head above water with 7 kids, eventually 9 kids. Their kids at least were like a few years apart, so that they didn't have all 9 kids in the house at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
The older ones were off and getting married and so on and so forth and having their own families. After this 15 years, and them looking for a place where they could, really settle in, their son was working for one of the farmers in Williamstown neighborhood. And he said, there's a vacant farm out on, one of the side roads, if you would want to try to live there.
Mm-hmm.
So they decided that they would try it, and on the McKeegan Road. And so the place had been abandoned. And so they talked with one of the neighbors, and the neighbor said, well, if you want to pay some rent for the place, you can, move in there and see how it goes. Okay. So, of course, they didn't have a lot of money. So instead of paying rent, my grandmother was working for them.
Mm-hmm.
Doing their laundry and doing their dishes and doing their house cleaning and housekeeping and wallpapering and whatever. So that went on for like the first year that they were there. So that next spring, this car comes in with these 2 well-dressed men, get out of the car, looking around. My grandfather comes out of the bar and says, so can I help you with something? Yeah, well, they said, well, we understand that you're squatters here. And so you have to move on. My grandfather said, I've never been a squatter. And I've always worked for my living and so on. And he said, I don't understand this. He said, we've been working this off, like, working for the neighbors, working this off. And they said, well, it really doesn't belong to your neighbors. It was a foreclosure. And the man that had it and his wife he was a soldier, and when he came home from the war, they gave him a mortgage. Well, I guess like when the bottom fell out of everything in 1929, they up and moved and left and abandoned both farms out there because it was his father-in-law's farm that was across the road.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, they said, well, this really belongs to the Soldiers Settlement Board, and it doesn't belong to anyone else here. And so they talked it all over and said, we've been working on the place here and trying to get it up and running again, and it was in very bad condition when we moved in here a year ago, and we got it so that we could spend the winter. And so they decided that they would hold a mortgage for them. The settlement, they settled on a mortgage. And that was the mortgage I talked about, where they paid half in the spring and half in the fall.
Yeah, half in the fall, yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, that was how they ended up there. And so it was like, make a homestead out of this rundown, dilapidated place that had been abandoned for several years. At least, if it did happen in 1929, which I'm not quite sure, but it was like during that Depression era. And they moved in there in April of 1936. And my uncle, my father's youngest brother, was 8 years old when they moved in there. And he lived there his whole life. They kept working on the place and getting it up to par and so on and so forth. And so by the time I came along in 1944, they had already been there for like 8 years, and they had the place going pretty good. And they had been working on the house and so on. And so in the kitchen, the old kitchen had a pantry where the sink was, and the dish, dish shelves and stuff. And it was cold in there. It was right off the kitchen, but it was separated, by a wall from the kitchen. And so my grandfather said, "Hey, this isn't good idea." So he said, "We're going to take down this pantry. We're going to take this pantry down, and we're going to build some cabinets in here." So the boys are wondering, well, where are we getting material to build kitchen cabinets and stuff? Grandfather said, "Well, don't worry about it." He said, "We'll figure something out." So the wood that was there was all matchboard, what they called matchboard, which kind of like shiplap.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
But it was thin, thinner wood. And so they took it down very carefully, and they built cupboard doors and things out of this matchboard, and they put in a kitchen for my grandmother, kitchen cabinets, over the shelving that was there, and kind of built it up and made it, but opened it up so that it was in the kitchen.
So they took the wall down.
So they took the wall down, and they used that wood to build the cabinet doors and everything with, and that was what was there when I was a kid. And they whitewashed it, and so it was all white cabinets and black hinges and latches, the old-fashioned latches, and yeah, it was really pretty nice, I thought. Of course, nothing like what some of the neighbors had, all these fancy cupboards, glass fronts and all this kind of stuff.
Well, you know what? I would have rather have had your grandparents'
I know,
cupboards.
I loved it. There was also a pantry, they created a little pantry under the stairway, so that's where the flour barrel and everything sat, in the little pantry, and the pans and shelves in there held a lot of different things.
It's funny, when I see a pantry in a house,
Yeah,
I get so excited.
I know.
I love pantries. Like the old-fashioned pantries.
An actual old pantry.
I do, I love them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So their little, her little pantry was like under the stairway, Grammy wasn't very tall. She was about 4'11".
Oh, wow, yeah.
So she wasn't very tall, so it didn't matter that it was kind of low.
Mm-hmm.
To me, it didn't matter at all because I was just a
you were
little
a
girl.
little kid.
And play hide and seek with my uncle and stuff, and I'd hide behind the flour barrel in the pantry. It's like, so I was going to tell you about some of the animals that we had, where it's kind of funny. So in the spring, the pigs, they had two big sows. I mean, they were big girls, and they'd have a big litter of, piglets.
Mm-hmm.
And one of them didn't take care of her piglets very well. And so my grandfather would watch her, and he would make sure that when her piglets were born, he'd take them out and put them in with the other sow.
Mm-hmm.
And so the other sow would have all these piglets that she was feeding. And so he came in one day, and I was probably about 3 years old. He came in one day with this little pink piglet in his arms, and he said, my grandmother's name was Marjorie. Marge, he said, if we can't feed this pig, we're going to lose it. It's going to die because it's not getting enough nourishment, and it's, it's like the little runt.
Yeah.
It's being pushed out
Mm-hmm.
and can't get in to eat. So she said, okay, well, I guess, we'll have to take care of that. So she kept that pig in the house for about 6 weeks. And she would sit in the rocking chair with that pig wrapped in a blanket and feed it a warm bottle of milk.
Pigs in a blanket.
You have something clever every video.
He does, pigs in a blanket. Yeah.
That's funny.
And it had a little box behind the stove, where she kept it.
Mm-hmm.
And it grew. I was really sad when they had to take it out and put it outside, because I just loved that little pig, and to see her sitting there and rock it like a baby, and feed it with the bottle and rock it like a baby. It was like, it was just like something out of a fairy tale,
That's cute.
Yeah, so that was one of the animals that, that they nurtured. Got some special attention.
Well, yeah, because, every animal mattered.
Yeah.
You were making money off of them, right?
Yeah, so they were selling the piglets.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were selling the piglets.
That would have been a lot of money lost.
Yeah,
If they lost that piglet.
yeah, if they lost the piglet, that would be money lost.
Mm-hmm.
And they also, they would keep one pig for their meat,
Mm-hmm.
and they'd sell the rest.
Yeah.
So anyway, that took place, and then the other animals. Of course, these are all my little childhood memories.
Mm-hmm.
They'd have calves every spring, and of course the calves would, they'd suckle their mothers
Mm-hmm.
for so many weeks,
Mm-hmm.
and then they'd have to be weaned off. And so when they would wean them off, of course my uncle and I were, it was like I was always with him, and him or my grandfather or my grandma, I was with them all, whatever was going on, I was in the middle of it, as often as they let me.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, he said to me, okay, now we're going to wean the calf. So he said, we're going to take the milk, and we're going to put it in a pail. And then he said, you have to put your hand in the pail and in the milk.
Mm-hmm.
And then you put your fingers up so that the calf thinks that it's a nipple.
Mm.
And the calf will start sucking on that, and it'll start sucking the milk.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. So he said, I'll do it first, he said, and you can see what I'm doing, and then you try it. It was kind of like drinking that buttermilk.
He's talking you into something you really don't want to do.
He's talking me into doing something. So anyway, yeah, sure enough, I'm going to try it. So I put my hand in there, and the calf's tongue comes down around my fingers, and it starts sucking my fingers. and it's got this kind of gritty tongue, you know, a little gritty tongue. But it didn't really bother me. It was like, yeah, okay, so yeah, the calf's learning to drink now by itself. And so we would take the pails out, you know, and after the calf learned, like you'd only do that a couple of days.
Yeah.
And then the calf would be, you know, as soon as you got the pail there, the calf wants its head in there and, you know, drink the milk. And then they'd tie the calves out around the yard, you know, out around the, well, it wouldn't be the yard, but, you know, out around the barnyard, where it was grassy, like, so that they'd start eating the grass, you know, be in the spring. The grass is nice and green and fresh and, yeah. So, yeah, and then in the spring too was when the, so anyway, to go back to the calves here for a minute, they would keep the female calves to build their herd with, and they would sell the steers. They would, you know, sell the steers, and they would keep one. They'd keep one for their meat. That's how I remember it now. They didn't always have beef because they couldn't afford to keep it. You know, they'd sell the beef, you know, the calves off. But I remember them keeping one. So I mean, I might have been like maybe 4 or 5 years old by the time they were able to afford, you know, to keep a beef calf, a calf for beef. But anyway, I remember my grandmother saying, can we afford to have our ham and our bacon cured this year so that we can have ham and bacon, you know? And my grandfather was always bartering things. And so he, you know, yeah, well, maybe, you know, we'll see how it goes.
Possibly.
If we can, yeah. But we did. And so Grampy would go out in the shed, like I told you before, how the meat hung in the shed. And if Graham said, okay, we're going to have some bacon today, it would, you know, maybe on Saturday morning or something. We're going to have some bacon this morning. Grampy would go out and he'd saw off all these nice slabs of bacon, bring them in nice thick, you know, with the rind on. They're so good. And we'd have our bacon every, you know. And yeah, so that was our meat. And they hung their hams out there too. Like they usually had a couple of hams from their pig and their sides of bacon. And so that, yeah, everything hung out there in the shed where it was cold. All the meat over the cellar door. So.
You guys did chickens too, you said, right?
Oh yeah, we had chickens.
Did you did you kill a chicken like when you needed it, or did you process a bunch at a time?
No, we'd kill it as we needed it.
As you needed it, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
we'd kill it as we needed it because we had no refrigeration. So they would kill a chicken, like if they said, okay, we're going to have chicken for dinner on Sunday, you know, go out and kill the chicken.
Go get the chicken.
Yeah, yeah. They did raise chickens one year for meat to sell. And I remember my grandfather killing the chickens and bringing them in, and my grandmother, you know, plucking them. And they always kept the feathers. So my grandfather said that there was a certain way to kill the chicken so that the feathers, you know, you didn't have to put them in the water because they wanted the feathers dry, and you know, so he'd kill the chicken in a certain way that he did, and the feathers would come out easier, and my grandmother would sew in that pantry door. And she had a big basket that she kept the feathers in. And it was a basket that an Indian woman that they lived near had made for her. And it was called a feather basket. The whole idea of having a feather basket was that if your feather pillows or your feather, tick or whatever got low on feathers, you could open it and stuff more feathers in there and fluff it up, But anyway, they'd keep the feathers and make pillows and, and everything. Oh, I must tell you about how they sold the chickens to one of the grocery stores in town. So the train ran up behind our farm. Like right at the top of the hill was the train track, and the train went twice a day, up in the morning early and back in the afternoon. They called it the milk train, I think, because it hauled the milk and hauled, whatever. So anyway, my grandfather would, they didn't have, their transportation was a horse and wagon or a horse and sleigh. And so they made a deal with the train conductor or train engineer to go out and flag the train down, and if they wanted to send something or if someone wanted a ride or whatever, and they'd stop at the crossing and pick them up. So this one particular time my uncle told me about this was kind of cute. They would take cattails, you know what cattails are, and they would soak them in kerosene, dry them, and then soak them in kerosene and light it as a torch. So that was
I can see that.
Yeah, that was their flag to flag the train down with, because it would be early in the morning that they'd be coming. It's still dark in the winter, and they're selling these chickens. So they'd get so many chickens ready that the grocer would tell them, okay, I'll take a half a dozen chickens on, such and such a day, Thursday or something. And if you have any potatoes, you could take an extra bag of potatoes or this and that, to sell in his store. And we'll pick them up at the train station. My grandfather says to my uncle, okay, so now you're designated to get up in the morning and be up and dressed by the time I'm ready. And we're taking these chickens and these potatoes out to the train. So, oh, okay, well, he was probably 10 years old or so, 9 or 10. And he said, oh, okay. So that was his job, was to be up and be ready. And so it's in the winter, and they hauled things on what they called a hand sled, which would be the sleds with the runners, like the metal runners. Yeah. A wooden sled with the metal runners. So they called it a hand sled because you pulled it by the rope. And so I put the stuff all on that, and they took it out to the train, and they flagged. It's like, okay, we're going to light the torch now, flag the train down, and the train comes screeching in, stops. It doesn't stop, but it stops, but it's still running.
It's like a rolling stop.
Yeah.
Like a stop sign.
And they said, okay, so take the chickens, take the potatoes, and take them up to the grocer, and they're going to meet you there, at the train station for these things. Okay, so that was good. So they did that. So my uncle said, okay, so it was uphill from the house to the train track. It was uphill. And so they say, okay, we've got the 2 sleds and our lantern. And of course they put the torch out. Get the lantern and the 2 sleds. So they start walking back to the top of the hill from the train track, and my grandfather says, okay, I'll race you. So they both jump on the sleds. They both jump on the sleds. My grandfather's sitting on the sled with the lantern between his legs, and my uncle said, well, I just ran with that sled and, on my belly, and down we went, and he won. So the other uncle, he was 4 years older than my young uncle. And so he had been the one that had always been designated to go to the track or do whatever chore had to be done early in the morning and all this. So he said to the younger one, oh, so how was that? Getting up that early in the morning, and how was that? So my younger uncle said, well, he said, I don't think I want to do that all the time. And pretended that he didn't have any fun. And all the while he's thinking, oh, I hope that Dad asks me again next time. Have another race.
He had plenty of fun.
So he had lots of fun, but he let on to his brother that he didn't have much fun. And those two, they were always, they were always kind of at, how it is with an older brother. Yeah, whatever, rolls downhill. Yeah. My dad was like the next older, and his brother. Older, they had the two older brothers, and they would come home, they'd work, during the week out at the neighbors, they'd work like chore guys out at the neighbors and so on. And they'd come home on the weekends, and of course they'd harass their younger brothers and, and have a grand old time with that. But anyway, this one particular time, they had killed their little steer for the winter, for their winter meat. And so the two older boys decided that they were going to tease the two younger ones, and they kept the legs off the steer. The bottom of the legs, like the hoofs and And so it came Christmas. They had hid them away, and it came Christmas time. They decided they were going to play a trick on the two younger boys. And so they went out and they made these tracks in the snow with these hooves, like it was reindeer tracks. And they took skis and made
like sleigh,
the sleigh track, and then the deer tracks, right? And they okay, so they get up on Christmas morning. And they said to the two younger ones, come on, you gotta get up. You gotta get up. Come on. It's Christmas morning. No. I mean, they were at the age where they really didn't believe in Santa anymore. And it's like, no, Mother said we could sleep in today because it's Christmas morning. We could sleep in if we wanted to a little bit. And that's not, no. So finally they coerced them into getting up, and they said, you got to get up because I think that you need to see this. This is really important. So they got them up and took them out and showed them. It's like, what? Deer tracks? No way. No way. And sleigh tracks? No way. And they just go off into like they took right off.
So it just like ended. So Santa's
like,
up in the air.
So, they just took right off. No way. So they come back in and they were kind of jibing the boys, the younger ones, about Santa's reindeer and this and that, and they went on and on and on about the deer tracks, and it had to be Santa. Yeah, okay. It was Santa. Okay. So they go out now, and it's one of their chores was to fill the wood box every morning. So, and they did their chores usually before breakfast. Graham's fixing their breakfast, and they're doing their thing. And this is before I'm born. Now this is, back a little ways. So they go out and they're getting wood out of the woodshed. And the dog goes out, and he comes out with one of those feet off of the off of the calf. And it's like, what is that?
Whoops.
And so they start looking around, and they had thrown those, after they got done with them, threw them back over the wood pile in the shed. You know, the legs.
The dog found it.
And the dog, of course, smelled them out, and and found the dog's out there chewing on the leg. And
Busted.
so they come in, and it's like they come in, and they start saying, I don't know about Santa's reindeer. I think he lost one of his reindeers last night. It's going to be too bad. I don't know which one it was. And they're talking back and forth, you know, with this. I don't know which one it was. If it was Dancer or Prancer or who. But anyway, oh, well, I hope it wasn't my favorite reindeer. And so on and so on. And so my grandfather hears them saying something about a dead reindeer. And he said, what's going on with you guys? What's with this reindeer business anyway? You know, my grandfather would get kind of gruff. What is going on here with you guys? So, oh, well, the dog's out there, and he's got a reindeer leg, and he's chewing on a reindeer leg, and what? So they got found out because the dog found the reindeer leg.
Yeah, busted.
They got found out, and yeah, so I guess, you know, the two younger boys thought that was pretty good because they kind of got back at. He told us about the reindeer leg and how the dog found the reindeer leg.
That is funny.
So funny.
Trying to trick him, and then his
Yeah.
dog comes up.
The dog come out with the leg. They didn't come in and accuse them, though. They just came in and said, I don't know, Santa lost one of his
Santa
reindeer.
lost a reindeer.
Yeah, I think he lost
That's
a reindeer
sad.
last night. Yeah, dog's got the reindeer leg out there chewing on it. Anyway, these are all the stories that I was told when I was a kid. And
Well, some of them you were there for.
some of them I was there for, some of them I was told. It was always fun.
How does it make you feel to hear the stories about your family?
It's interesting.
Because she's technically your aunt, so.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've never heard these stories before, so.
It's pretty cool, right?
Yeah, it is kind of cool. Yeah.
That's your
We've got a
family.
huge family.
And now look at you, homesteading.
You had that in there, didn't you?
Yeah. Well, look at that. I mean, it's sort
Well,
of full
that's true. It is
circle if you
about
think about
farming,
it.
yeah, that's
Yeah,
true.
it's totally about
It's about
farming.
your grandfather.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Which
we
I
talked
really
about
didn't know
snow
much
yet.
about. My mom never really told me.
No.
No.
Yeah, you've never heard this stuff, right?
No.
Yeah.
No.
Did you know it was
She might-
existed?
No, not really, no.
She might not even know it. A lot of this stuff.
Yeah, she was really young during that whole time, right? And
Well, she wasn't even born yet. I was 10 years old when my mom was born. So. it
what
was a
age did
lot.
you guys move to,
I was 14 and my
Mass?
mother was 4.
when we moved to Mass?
Yep.
Rhode Island.
Rhode Island.
Oh, Rhode Island, okay.
So your mother started kindergarten there at 5 years old.
So, what age
She was only
did
4.
you stay in Rhode Island?
Well, I moved to Massachusetts with them. What year did we move to Mass? 60. Yeah, 60. And the next summer we got married and I moved back to Rhode Island with them. And then he scared after all that.
You gotta cut.
I
you gotta cut that
I can
out.
edit that. I'm recording.
He scared them.
She didn't know I was recording. It's okay. I can edit that.
Hey,
I can
that's what
edit.
journalism
I can
is.
literally
Yeah.
edit that word out.